Noon. Now that you've added workflow to your application through the diagram editor, now what? How does this affect your target application? The example today I'll be walking through demonstrates using the workflow behavior through a client registration or a patient registration process. The demo application that I've spun up now is a very primitive one, but it will demonstrate how workflow works. First of all, we've added workflow to our patient registration entity. Going into the administration section of our application, you'll now notice that you have a workflow button in our side menu here. This is where we configure our workflows. For the moment, I only have one workflow already created. This is a registration workflow. Registration workflow, we define a name, description, and of course the entities that have workflow enabled for them. This is only the ones that are enabled, so you can see patient profile and registration. For this one, we'll be selecting registration. Saving your draft then allows you to move on to the creation of your states and your transitions. So as with any good workflow, you have a series of states and transitions between those states. In the example we've got here right now, first state is pending, second state is booked, cancelled, and completed. Starting at pending, which we've marked as our start state, any new registration that we create will be marked as pending. Now, once we've started with pending, we can then transition that into one or two different states based upon these outgoing transitions. Clicking edit here, we can see those. So in this case, we can move our entity from pending to booked or to cancelled, but we can't move it to complete because that is not one of the outgoing transitions. Having a look at our booked transition here, or our booked state, outgoing transitions again, we can move from to cancelled or to completed, and we have one incoming transition, and that is from pending that we saw before. Moving forwards, you'll see something similar with cancelled. Once it's cancelled, there are no outgoing transitions. Cancelled is a final state, and then completed is also a final state. But you will note that there is two incoming transitions and one. Being runtime configurable, we can add and delete and configure these workflows or these transitions and states on the fly without re-releasing the application. Additionally, we can add additional workflows by clicking new workflow here. So for example, if I was to create an example workflow, we'll call it example. Again, hook it up to our registration and save our start. We have no states, it's a blank slate. New workflow, mark as our start, we'll call it start. Second workflow, finished. A very simple two-state workflow. At this stage, we cannot move from start to finished until we define some of our transitions. Edit, add a transition. We're going to call this finalized. And our outgoing state is finished. Saved. Now we've got our start state, our finish state, and our transition between them. We'll save that. Now going back, you can see we have two workflows. Switching over to what that actually looks like for the user, once they go to use or create a registration, we can have a look here. Create, we have two workflows, registration workflow and our example workflow. First one is starting at the pending state, and our second one that we just created starting at the start state. We can then of course select it, but we can only transition to either a cancelled or booked, or in this case, finished. Hitting save, we'll save our workflow at our current state. Moving it to a booked or a finished, we'll move or transition our workflow into those two states or our entity. Now it's booked and finished. Notice that we cannot move or transition out of finished, and we can move from booked into either a cancelled or complete state as per our rules that we set out in the administration section. Of course, workflow can be assigned to any entity, and as you saw, you can configure multiple workflows for each individual entity that has the workflow behavior. Thank you for listening.